Hey everybody, my name is Sami Kassab. I'm an enterprise research analyst with Messari, where I focus on Bitcoin as well as other crypto infrastructure ranging from physical infrastructure projects to general application infrastructure. Before we get this started, we're going to be talking about DeFi, all things DeFi on Bitcoin. But for me, Bitcoin was my introduction to crypto as well as with a lot of other people. It was my first true love, and I still follow it closely. But for me and for a lot of other people in the space, throughout 2022, Bitcoin started to get a bit stale, right? There wasn't much activity or development taking place around the base layer or on layers in general. And a lot of the conversations were just surrounding Austrian economics, monetary policy, and trying to predict which country was going to adopt Bitcoin next. However, that all changed at the start of this year with the Ordinals protocol. And that basically just led to a boom in general inscriptions on the base layer, which led to NFTs emerging on Bitcoin. We had narrative of Bitcoin being used as kind of a general storage layer, as well as like a data availability layer for rollups. We saw the emergence of token standards such as BRC20s, which led to a nice little meme coin craze. But in general, just fungible tokens on Bitcoin. And now we're entering a new era, which is DeFi on Bitcoin. And today I have with me, three very bright individuals who are all working on DeFi related projects on Bitcoin. So I'd like to just quickly introduce everyone on this panel. We have Robin from Liquidium, we have Dylan from Bitflow Finance, and we have Abdel from Deep Lake. So to kick this off, I want to just pass the mic over to each of you, have you guys just kind of introduce yourselves, a little bit of your background and what you're building. Let's start with you, Robin.
Hey, yeah, I'm Robin, the CEO and co-founder of Liquidium. And we are building an ordinal lending protocol, something where you can use your ordinal to borrow native Bitcoin against it. We have seen things like this on Ethereum with NFTFi and Arcade, and now the latest innovation was Blend from Blur. But yeah, obviously with different assets, you kind of need financial infrastructure around it. And it's awesome to see that you can build something like this on Bitcoin now.
Yeah, agreed. How about you, Dylan?
Hey, my name is Dylan. I'm the CEO of Bitflow Finance. We are building a decentralized exchange for Bitcoiners. Our thinking is that 2023 is the Bitcoin DeFi summer. Inscriptions are making big waves in the mempool, and we have more and more liquidity coming to Bitcoin and Bitcoin layers. But right now, this liquidity is fractured. It sits in isolated pools. So we're building the plumbing to connect this liquidity and connect projects and communities across the entire Bitcoin ecosystem.
And last but not least, Abdel.
Yeah, hey guys, thank you for having me today. My name is Abdel and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Deep Lake Finance. So yeah, Deep Lake is building the smart contract infrastructure on top of Bitcoin. Sami, you talked about currency and everything that you were saying in before 2023 was just like Bitcoin. What is the value of Bitcoin? What is the country that is going to use Bitcoin as their legal tender next? And that was because we were missing a lot of the smart contract capabilities on Bitcoin. And yeah, Deep Lake is working on that particular challenge, particular problem to bring smart contracts on Bitcoin to be able to, for example, empower things like Liquidium that someone wants to, for example, take his ordinals or one of his ordinals and get a loan against that, or trading DEXes or anything that is needing any financial infrastructure to be built.
Awesome. So I kind of want to start off with a high-level question that I'll throw out to the crew. So in general, this was a question that I first had when I started looking into Bitcoin DeFi, but I know it's a question that general crypto participants will have. And it's, why does Bitcoin need its own DeFi ecosystem? So right now, the current state is we have a whole bunch of other smart contract platforms that exist, such as Ethereum, Solana, so on. And we have the ability to essentially wrap our Bitcoin and bridge it over to other smart contract platforms. So what advantages are there with a native Bitcoin DeFi ecosystem? I'll kick it off to whoever wants to start. Take that one.
I'll take this one. I think it's trust. You said wrapped, and once you say wrapped, you like people start imagining going through a bridge, going through a custodian, going through a centralized entity in most cases. And Bitcoiners do not want to use their Bitcoin in a wrapped way. They do not want to give it away. Most of Bitcoiners today are using cold storages just because they do not trust anything else with their Bitcoin. If you remember the craze that happened a couple of months ago with the Ledger, and just this information about, we're going to give you a opt-out or opt-in to be able to do some things with your cold storage, and it just killed or almost killed the company. So Bitcoin is particular, is special. People do not want to bridge it or use it on anything that is not native to Bitcoin, because once you do that, you feel like you are giving away your Bitcoin and you do not have control over it anymore. And that's a big issue on the Bitcoin chain, or a big challenge that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I think that is, Bitcoiners in general are just very conservative and risk averse with their Bitcoin, just like you said, and removing as many centralized intermediaries, which could be the entities who are doing the wrapping and holding that Bitcoin, I believe is needed in order to bring Bitcoiners into the DeFi ecosystem, or just to be able to do more with their Bitcoin. So in general, a lot has changed in the Bitcoin DeFi ecosystem now versus 6 months ago. But what's interesting is that there haven't been really any new interesting technology or any technology releases in general. There was no upgrade on Bitcoin to enable a lot of this. So without going into the tech yet, I guess, how would you guys describe the Bitcoin DeFi ecosystem today versus 6 months ago? I'll pass that one to you, Dylan, if you want to take that.
Yeah, sure. I think it's more active. It's more fun. There's more users, more liquidity, more interest from investors. But overall, I think it's still pretty nascent. And you asked about the advantages of a native, Bitcoin DeFi, right, ecosystem. I think one of the reasons why it's great to explore is there's this debate about whether transaction fees alone will be enough to secure the network long term. But only time will tell. So for now, why not go ahead and explore and experiment with new protocols and apps that grow the amount of on-chain activity and get people more excited to use Bitcoin. So yeah, that's why Ordinals are so great.
Yeah, completely agree with you. We do have a security budget problem, or the network has a security budget problem. So better to kind of experiment, like you said, now rather than waiting until it becomes a problem in the future. So one question I've also had is, we've seen a lot of platforms and side chains and other Bitcoin layers already exist prior to this whole Ordinals boom that kind of triggered this DeFi ecosystem or growth of the DeFi Bitcoin ecosystem. But a question I have is, why haven't we really seen platforms such as Liquid, Stack, Sovereign, RSK really take off to date? They've been fairly niche at this stage, or until a few months ago.
I can take this one. I think that really the people didn't think about Bitcoin when they thought about use cases for crypto or for blockchain. Right now, it was just Bitcoin and smart contract capable blockchains like Ethereum or like Solana. And when you said like there is a side chain to Bitcoin that enables DeFi, was just like the people didn't really know what it could be used for, or why this would make sense if we have Ethereum and Solana. So I think because the layer one ultimately, so Bitcoin wasn't used for these things, there wasn't really a need to do it on a sidechain for Bitcoin. We can take, for example, our protocol as example. We started on Stacks actually, and we built the first NFT lending platform there. And we just noticed like there is so little liquidity. The NFTs are not worth a lot because there are so few users, or there were until up to this point. And I think now is the first time that we see like use cases on layer one Bitcoin and people actually coming to Bitcoin to experience DeFi, NFTs, and so on. And now we kind of, for the first time, reached the limitations of Bitcoin, increase the fees of Bitcoin, that we actually need a layer two.
Yeah, I think Robin's right. It's like sort of like a lack of protocol market fit, but also like a symptom of skating to where the puck is going, right? Dan Held said something maybe like a month ago on a podcast about something along the lines of anyone with a pulse knows that Bitcoin is going to scale in layers. But, you know, we need more layer one activity to drive these higher fees, and we need it more regularly, right? And that type of stuff will drive the adoption.
Yeah, and we saw that exactly play out with a lot of major exchanges actually integrating with Lightning once, you know, the base layer started getting congested. And we've actually seen, you know, like new layer two protocols emerge to compete with Lightning. And so I think we really needed to get this initial like boom in base layer activity, as well as like congestion, to basically drive innovation on the base layer. I kind of want to take this conversation now a little bit more in depth on the technical side of, you know, what's enabling some of these DeFi protocols. And so, like I briefly said, we saw Ordinals and BRC20 marketplaces emerge, and now we're starting to see DeFi emerge. So Abdul, I'd like to ask you kind of like what technologies enable this. If you could just kind of walk us through, because I know we have DLCs and we have partial. So DLCs are discrete log contracts, and we have PBSTs, which are, or PSBTs. I always get those mixed. I always get it mixed up. Partially signed Bitcoin transactions, and you know these have been around for a while, but now they're actually finally being used, you know, to create as almost like as smart contracts, right? So if you can kind of walk us through and explain those to the audience, that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, of course. So the most fundamental thing, or like the thing that people get exposed to first, are PSBTs, or partially signed Bitcoin transactions. And these are just like envelopes to allow people to participate in one transaction. So before PSBTs, what you could do was to create one transaction to say, hey, I'm going to use my address and send Bitcoin to this other address of the receiver. But if you wanted to like pull in multiple people that are that wants to send different BTC amounts at the same time using the same transaction, you could not do that because you did not have any way to build that off chain, share it with these people, each one of them sign it on their own device, and then get the final result and publish that to the Bitcoin chain. So PSBTs are just being used for that. Like I said, they are an envelope that allow people or multiple participants to pull in on the same transaction, to input their BTC on the same transaction and sign that transaction asynchronously. They do not have like to be on the same room or like online at the same time. That can be like shared between these or among these participants. They signed the transaction, and then once it's done, they finish that and broadcast it to the Bitcoin chain. So this is like the most fundamental layer to smart contracts or to Bitcoin DeFi. And then on top of that, you have Taproot and DLCs. Taproot is just like an optimization of signing or how you can sign. Before Taproot, what you could do is you need to validate each signature from each participant by itself. With Taproot, you can like aggregate multiple signatures into one tree, and this creates one signature at the end that can be validated one time, right? And then for DLCs, they are a little bit like PSBTs, maybe. PSBTs are for immediate execution of things. With DLCs, what you can do is that you can have delayed or deferred execution of things based on some event that will trigger in the future. So you can like have a contract and build the terms of the contract now, push the chain, broadcast the Bitcoin to the chain, and then based on something that is going to happen in the future, this thing that you just broadcasted will be settled to a result. So yeah, these are the three most fundamental things to Bitcoin DeFi.
Really appreciate you breaking that down for us. And so, Robin, Liquidium is the key technology that really Liquidium is leveraging to enable, borrowing, lending. Is that DLCs?
Correct. Yeah, we're actually using DeepLake's APIs for that. So essentially, what we use DLCs for, and I think this is an interesting use case, is we could use it as kind of an escrow. So as Abdel said, you can use DLCs to delay something in the future or like pre-agree upon something and kind of hold off until something happens and then broadcast the transactions. So basically what we're doing is a borrower can request a loan on our platform. So they can send out a request, gets broadcasted to our platform, and then a lender can accept this request. And as soon as both parties sign this, basically a DLC opens up and the ordinal goes into this DLC and is held there. And the DLC has an oracle attached to it, and the oracle reads the on-chain status. And there are two outcomes that can happen. So once the loan starts, obviously, either the borrower can repay the loan or they don't repay the loan. And whatever happens out of these two scenarios, either one of these predetermined outcomes of the DLC will happen. So if the borrower did repay the loan, the ordinal goes back to the borrower. And if the borrower didn't repay the loan, the ordinal goes to the lender. And it's really interesting that you can use things like PSBTs and DLCs for ordinals, because at its core, ordinals are just like individual sets. So they are Bitcoin, and DLCs are like they were created in order to hold Bitcoin, but now you can like hold ordinals with it and create like different scenarios and outcomes with it, which is really cool.
Yeah, completely agree. And I know, Dylan, you are also leveraging those same technologies for the DEX you're building. That just made me think about the idea of Bitcoin as a productive asset, which I know could be a very powerful narrative, the ability to actually like earn a yield on your Bitcoin. So could you briefly describe we don't have too much time left, how BitFlow enables users to generate yield on their Bitcoin?
Yeah. That's the most important question, right? Like, where does the yield come from? So the short answer is that the protocol collects a fee on every trade. And then there's a smart contract that on a layer 2 that holds these as rewards for the liquidity providers. The second most important question is like, in what form is the yield paid out? So let's suppose you have a pool of token X and token Y. As a liquidity provider, your reward is actually paid out in token X and token Y. And we call this like a real yield. And this is great because you're not just generating a yield on your native Bitcoin, but you can generate a Bitcoin yield on your Bitcoin. And one of the things that liquidity providers are particularly excited about is that we're bringing together like different versions of wrapped and pegged versions of Bitcoin on layer twos and creating like deep liquidity around these assets and allowing you to do like an atomic swap back to native Bitcoin whenever you're ready. But why do they care about that? Well, they can earn a layer two Bitcoin yield without the risk of impermanent loss.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a massive use case. I think we're going to encounter, I'm actually not sure. Do you think it's going to be difficult to convince some of these Bitcoiners who have their Bitcoin in like cold storage to basically deploy them in these liquidity pools? Or are you more targeting some of these new users that came from the Ordinals activity?
Yeah, no Bitcoiner, no two Bitcoiners are the same, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking to the people that are excited about increasing the amount of layer one activity on Bitcoin. That's the type of users that will use BitFlow.
Yeah, and hey, I mean, I'm looking for a way to kind of earn yield on my Bitcoin, so I'll be
All
checking.
right, we should talk.
Yeah, let's talk. Well, this was extremely insightful. I appreciate all you guys for, joining me today, sharing your views on the DeFi space. And yeah, it was a pleasure chatting, everyone.
Likewise.
Thanks for having us. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.